home today to see Cosimo off, you believe, to join the big Sunday meal before his deployment in case this is his last Easter. But after I hand you this letter, you will understand that I also came to say goodbye, not to Cosimo, but to you. My desk, where I write, looks out the front window. Today the garden is barren, but you cannot stop the circle. Nonno was right about that. The last thing he said to me, maybe to anyone, still ringing out months after his death. I remember the sound of his voice as I left his room at the hospital, but I also hear him with me in the present and clear as day. Remember so many years ago, his ghost asked me just today, when I told you to become a teacher? Turns out it was prophecy, not imperative. The circle I could not stop. You were only 5, he reminded me as he laid out the evidence, how I navigated him to the Toys R Us in White Plains, showed him how to set his digital watch, strategized a path through a suburban diner menu in a language he couldn't read. You were so young, but you were doing it even then. Of course I knew what work you would do. Nonno knew what work I would do, but he could not have predicted where I would do it. In this tiny college town surrounded by middle American farmland. Or maybe he saw it, but didn't think to tell me. Didn't think it was a big deal to leave a family behind. Leaving, sometimes, is another circle we cannot stop. Your parents understood this too. They could see it clear as day. Had they hired Nonno to paint the kitchen, the job would have been done by the Feast of All Saints, but you would still be in Montoro and I would not be here, would not even be alive to consecrate your story. There is no plural you in English. I mean to consecrate both of your stories, but even that does not say it. I mean not your respective stories, but the story that belongs to both of you together. La storia vostra, much cleaner in Italian. I learned Dante's Italian in school, but you would have started the circle in Neapolitan when you asked Nonno, when do you start? What can Neapolitan have packed into that question? That your father owned the farm, but that Nonno's father had emigrated, leaving Nonno in a room with a dirt floor that looked more like a cave than a house? That you pretended not to recognize him for the benefit of your parents, because you and Nonno had already met, but your parents didn't know. That Nonno was to understand this pretend ignorance as performance, as an evasive maneuver. That you thought the conversation was about hiring him to paint the kitchen, but that Nonno and your parents were talking about an arrangement of an entirely different sort. Could your Neapolitan have said all of that? Your parents set your collision in motion some weeks earlier as they left the house. Watch the sky, your father directed you over his shoulder. Cover the corn if the weather turns. He had spent the morning laying it out to dry on the flat roof. It started to rain. You looked for the ladder. You were distraught, desperate to find it. I know how your agitation would have looked, your hands tightly clasped. You clasped them together the same way whenever it rained after school when Cosimo and I were little, as you watched from my parents' car from the big window above the garage, fearing some catastrophic flood, or spin out into a ditch, or head-on collision that we would see on the local news, because by then you would learn that rain can change everything. You would have remembered how you clasped your hands tighter still, steeling yourself to endure your father's anger, how before the rain soaked through the corn, you had the idea to ask your uncle up the road about the ladder to run to his farm as it poured. There you found the painter your uncle had hired, no longer painting, leaning on the ladder in question, waiting on the storm. You started in on him. What kind of a person steals a ladder? From what sort of house would such a person come? From what sort of father? You did not notice gravity bending, did not feel planets sliding off axis. Instead, you tried to fix aggrieved expressions onto your eyes and the corners of your lips, but these were hard to maintain as Nonno smiled and laughed, carrying the ladder he stole, shifting it from arm to lighten the load. Weeks later, after your uncle had pressed the late summer harvest into a thin red table wine, your mother asked you to collect from him whatever scant bunches remained. She would hang them in the kitchen, as was the custom, until Christmas. As you carried them home, Nonno appeared out of nowhere, rode around you on a bicycle he maybe stole. He asked for a drink. You said no. He circled you a few more times, then pedaled off. Days later, he turned up again, this time at your house. Your parents, unsurprised, took them into their bedroom and closed the door, spoke quietly. Finally, your mother opened the door and asked, "Do you like him?" You did the math, looking over the unpainted walls. He was a good enough painter for your uncle to have hired. Had really only borrowed the ladder, had even taken the hint in terms of the grapes, no red flags. And anyway, it would be interesting to have him around the house. You liked his laugh. You would help this domestic transaction unfold, you decided on the spot, reviewing the timeline. The kitchen would be painted by the Feast of All Saints, and the grapes would hang until Christmas. That is when you asked to close the deal. When do you start? The grapes hung in your kitchen until Christmas. Nonno painted church ceilings in Montoro, near San Severino, outside Salerno, outside Naples. At the end, he painted the steel columns in the basement of your last house to look like marble. Whether he painted your family's kitchen all those years ago fell out of the story. You had a son, my father. You said that for years he refused to eat anything but the hearts of birds that Nonno would hunt with a slingshot, and that you would then bake into potatoes. You told Cosimo and me about this hunger strike with clasped hands as if recalling a famine or plague. Eventually, after enough subsequent tellings, the story swelled to pull all of the men of the town into the hunt, their own makeshift weapons held high, your community conspiring to keep my father alive. You were baffled when Cosimo and I laughed, when we named the story The Miracle of the Crossing for what happens next. In the middle of the night, in the middle of the ocean, on the way to America, my father finally gets hungry. You wake the cook, who makes pasta with clams, and my father eats like you have never seen him eat. When you retell the story around the Sunday table, Mom always has the last word, teasing you that when pasta with clams is in front of your son, he still eats like he's in the middle of the ocean. Like he'd only ever eaten bird hearts baked into potatoes. Just before he died, Nonno finally taught me his method. You said it would be too much for him, but he insisted. He corrected my grip on the knife, helped me find the counter pressure against the hinge of the cherry stone shell seated along my thumb. When he took a break to catch his breath, I said we should stop. He refused, so we kept going. Right before the meal, he said I could keep his clam knife and the white restaurant napkin he had used to catch the soap. Bring them back to your house, he offered, to your kitchen. I'd give you my knives, but you'll get in trouble with the airplane. I understood. The three of us ate lunch together, pasta with clams, and a crusty bastone to soak up what remained in our bowls of the nectar, wine, parsley, and butter. I pressed my bread into the broth, and a slice of garlic stuck into the soft white. I studied it, cut crosswise, browned in decent oil. Nonno's cut, Nonno's mark. A few days later, you fell across his casket, wailing. Learned behavior, someone whispered, as Dad nodded to Cosimo and me, flanking him in our dark suits. We understood this to mean that we should lift you off. We did. Then Nonno was in the ground, in his spot in the cemetery across the street from ShopRite. We held you in place in front of your own adjacent plot, still empty, maybe remembering the day, years earlier, when Nonno told you he had reserved these particular patches of ground. I bought 2 nice apartments, he had shout laughed. You turned white, imagining an impulsive real estate purchase in Florida or Arizona, then cursed him when he told you the truth. There are things you do not joke about. Back at the house, after the burial, I handed Cosimo my prized possession. A small metal rostrum that made music manuscript out of blank paper. Do you remember Dad using the same rostrum when he was young? When he was learning music, inking and rolling it across a white page, a clean 5-line staff in its wake? Cosimo swore to carry the rostrum into the war that no one thinks is coming, then back out the other side. He would keep this promise, like he kept his promise to salute in dress blues the painter your uncle hired. Cosimo returned to Nonno's grave a few days after the service. I had left already, but Dad described to me how Cosimo made his salute. Much faster than expected, his hand flying to his brow. You left your house over these past few weeks the same frenetic way. You left the garden and the garage full of bird cages and the basement with the faux marble columns to start a new life in my parents' big house with no exposed supports. Do you know about Cosimo's other promise? To someday make the ragu this painter made on Sundays, in the small kitchen in the basement with the faux marble columns? Have you told him your secret? That on your farm in Montoro, onions were pig food? That you would slide as many onions as you could sneak off the cutting board into the trash when Nonno's back was turned? His Sunday sauce was also yours, your furtive invention simmered in. Fewer onions, that is what you do not know. You might translate the Neapolitan in your head. You would remember one of those long ago Sundays in the house you left behind. Unremarkable, quiet as we shared a mid-afternoon meal around your table. The birds in cages the painter had caught to admire, not to sacrifice, hopping perch to perch. Today, Nonno told me what will happen. After my plane touches down in Newark, I will calculate the fare ETA out of traffic patterns, air train construction, and the line at the rental car counter, so Dad will know when to rise from his recliner to unlock the house. When he does, you will know that I am close. You will turn on every light. When I turn down the driveway, moments later, Dad will push back the kitchen island stool, descend the stairs, past the agreed-upon front door, and continue down to the garage. I will try to beat him there, springing from the rental car, keying in the code, the same number as your old house on Delancey Street. The lift will engage before I am done. I will hinge at the waist and peer under the opening door. Dad will laugh with his whole body. I will see you standing behind him, still awake. You will have been waiting all this time. You will tell me I look good, that you were worried after the funeral because I looked like shit. You will assure me that my color is better as you hold your palms to my face, then turn and nod approvingly at Dad for thinking through through my arrival as he sat waiting in the island, for speculating that I would rather load my suitcase directly into the house than drag it up the tiny path to the front door and accidentally maul the flower beds. Will you know in that moment that I am also covering my bases, having thought the likely scenarios through? Will you know that I traveled all this way to guide the circle to its close? On Easter Sunday, during Antipasti, you will stumble and fall. I will rush to you as your eyes well up in devastated, burning shame. You will apologize. I will joke. It's okay, Mom falls all the time. Crumbs will have scattered. You will try to clean them up. You will tell me you made a mess, your shame still burning. I will break this next moment too. You've cleaned up so many, you're allowed to make one. I mean it to be tender, but I sound like a jackass. You will watch your family laughing at tavola. We'll track our movements through rings of chairs on the back deck. You will sit in front of the screen, appearing as if by magic to your family in Montoro, Nonno's blood, bound to you all the same. They will greet you on the call as though you were a movie star. We'll see us surround you at the end. We'll watch as we dot the I and cross the T, as we set your affairs in order. They will say a presto, that they will see you soon, but they will mean addio, this is goodbye. Cosimo will have made the sauce. It is only right he should plate the pasta. After the bowls make their rounds, you will watch his face near the head of the table as he waits in silence, his apprehension drowning out the scraping of forks. For a long time, no one will speak, but you will understand the problem with this sauce. It is too close. It is basically Nonno's ragu. Cosimo will have used fewer onions because you will have told him today, Good Friday, as he made his shopping list, that onions are pig food. When everyone applauds him, Cosimo will say nothing because he will no longer really be at the table. He will be at Nonno's grave across from ShopRite, snapping his flat hand to his brow, setting affairs in order. You will fall asleep in your recliner as the meal winds on. We will try to wake you for espresso, but will not be able to. We will gather together to watch you breathe for as long as you will breathe. As your chest settles, I will reach into my pocket and remove this page. I will hold it up over my head, hoping to cast a spell, the same kind of magic you do in our cars when we first bring them home from the dealership, throwing coins under the mats and spit, muttering as if raising up this letter can teach us how to skin a lemon in an unbroken ribbon, to fold a fitted sheet into a square, to make basil grow out instead of up. The paper rattling in my hands held high will cause a great commotion. Dad will look over at me instead of at your chest coming to rest. Cosimo will notice and hold his arms out as if to say, honestly, now? I will shrug at Dad, hoping he will look back at you before your last breath. When it comes, I will be looking at you, but my father, your son, will be looking at me. I will tell Dad I am sorry for distracting him, but also because his mother at that moment will have died. He will double over, but before he grabs his chest and hinges at the waist, in that tiny beat of silence between the end of your life and the beginning of our grieving on its behalf, the big clock on the wall will stop ticking. The page in my hand unfolds, glows, casts crisp shadows across your darkened walls. The silhouettes solidify into recognition, into figures on a screen, characters in an old reel-to-reel on warping, warbling tape. We recognize ourselves in the shadow play that has become a grainy home movie, and in the grainy home movie that moves backwards at speed from that quiet moment. We gather together to watch you breathe. Late afternoon light makes the chair and scatter crumbs across the floor. Take my face in your hands with tears in your eyes. Tell me I look like shit after the funeral. Watch for me to arrive. Dad says I am coming, that you do not have to wait. You hear the phone and know I am close. I give Cosimo the rostrum and make him promise to bring it back. America recalls the fleet of bombers. Iran and Israel suck their missiles out of each other's cities. Nonno dies. I leave the hospital anyway. Nonno tells me that you cannot stop the circle. We prepare our final meal together. Israel leaves Gaza. Hamas reminds us in Persian. Russia leaves Ukraine. Cosimo volunteers. America leaves Iraq. America leaves Afghanistan. America leaves Iraq again. Then Saudi Arabia. Then Vietnam. Then Korea. You travel south, slightly west to Ellis Island. It is not a museum. You board an ocean liner with my father and sail backwards across the Atlantic to the port of Naples, where you disembark for Salerno, the smaller city, then north to a farm outside Montoro, where your mother is looking over the kitchen walls and thinking about their color. We are ghosts looking on, a vapor you do not yet know, a rustling from another time. You do not hear the sound of time bending backwards, of a circle erasing itself as you look into Nonno's face. You ask, when do you start? We hear your mother ask you if you like him, hear him ask your parents behind the closed door of their room, off of your unpainted kitchen, if he can marry you. This poor painter turns up again. He rides off, you say no. He circles around you on a bicycle asking for a grape. You walk what grapes remain back from your uncle's house. Your mother orders you to your uncle's house to retrieve the grapes that were to hang in your kitchen until Christmas. Nonno walks your ladder back in the rain. You confront him. You see each other for the first time, sensing something, an unwarranted recognition, the vague contours of an unfolding story, nondescript, worth considering nonetheless. You think to ask your uncle up the road about the missing ladder. You cannot find it anywhere. It starts to rain. Your parents leave the house. Your father orders you to cover the corn on the roof if it should start to rain. Your father lays corn out to dry on the flat roof. Nonno steals a ladder from the farm down the road so he can paint the tall house he had been hired to paint, hoping the weather will hold out long enough for him to finish the job. The tape reverses and rips forward. Your life spools out again at blinding speed. I wait to come back to myself in the gap, to rejoin my family in New York, in the pause after your breathing stops, but before Dad doubles over. I watch for the clock to start, making plans for the moment when it does. I will pull Dad into my chest before Cosimo envelops us both, before Dad heaves and then settles and makes the arrangements. Before I borrow a suit from Cosimo that will be too big, that I will wear nonetheless, as you join Nonno in the ground. No one will fall across your casket on its way down. But the film catches, undershoots the moment at which we will gather together around your recliner, redeposits me here at my desk instead. I write your life, knowing how it will end. I wait for the garden to come up. When I see you tonight, you will reveal the plans you have already made to join Nonno on the other side. You will tell me you are eager to begin the journey. I will ask, when do you start, as I hand you this letter, the history it tries to tell, tracing the unbroken line from the moment you and Nonno met to the moment your grandson, at a desk that overlooks an extravagant garden in the middle of nowhere, made an account of your life together. Because you cannot stop the circle. It is still being drawn. But someone has to draw it. I would like, in the end, to have tried.